Welcome to the FASA Leadership Lounge, where we dive into the policies shaping the work of Florida's school leaders. I'm Michelle White, Executive Director of the Florida Association of School Administrators.
And I'm Jessica Janasiewicz, lobbyist for FASA and several school districts across the state of Florida.
All right, Jess, it is finally here. The 2026 legislative session began last week. Property taxes, education funding, and vouchers, and of course, AI Bill of Rights appear to be major topics for this year. So let's get started with opening day and the governor's State of the State address.
Yes, so this is the governor's opportunity to share with the legislature what his priorities are for the upcoming legislative session. This is, of course, was his final State of the State, as he will be term limited out after this year. He did, rather than talk as much about what his priorities were for this year, he really spoke more about his tenure as governor and what he sees as the achievements of his administration. And he said that we've set the standard for the rest of the country to follow. We are the free state of Florida.
Yes, and during the remaining minutes of his 30-minute speech, he urged the legislature, of course, to pass bills on illegal immigration, eliminating diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, expanding gun rights, and supporting the state's rural areas.
And that rural piece is interesting because we know, of course, that's a priority for the Senate president. So it was a little bit of a nod towards something he knows is a priority.
Right.
But there was some tension in the air, to say the
very least.
The governor and the Speaker of the House did not appear to look at one another at all during their time together for the State of the State. And they didn't shake hands either, though he did shake hands with the Senate president. And obviously, we know there's been ongoing disagreements between the governor and what he sees as the actions of the House, and is taking issue of some of what they've been doing. However, the governor and the Senate president did exchange pleasantries, and that looked less tense, to be sure.
Yeah, and the Speaker and the Senate president also had some great interactions to start things off. They had a great little hug embrace. And, even though there are differences and they both addressed that they expect differences, hopefully at least their relationship can help things move forward this year.
Absolutely, because we can see when it falls apart, at least one of those dynamics, it certainly makes it very difficult to get things done.
It sure does. So back to the business that was conducted last week. It was a very full schedule for the first week. Mostly committees were meeting. The Senate Education Committee on Pre-K-12 heard a bill from Senator Gail Harrell, Senate Bill 206, which would add new credential requirements for teachers while providing financial aid to attain them.
That's right. So this bill will create a autism micro-credential in the teacher pipelines and would require state-approved teacher prep programs and certification programs for exceptional student education candidates. The requirement is tied to certification renewal and would begin on August 1st, 2027. So there was a lot of discussion about that and making sure that there was enough time for teachers for whom this would apply to actually get the certificate and not have it be something that, is immediate and everyone's scrambling to do all at once. The measure also would create an autism educator loan forgiveness program, which would offer up to $17,500 in student loan repayment over 5 years, which is $3,500 a year for eligible teachers who work as the primary instructor in qualifying classrooms where most of the students have autism. The bill would also require districts to offer at least one autism-specific professional learning opportunity each year.
So a great bill, really, in trying to support some of our most in need students. And good to know that an identical companion bill, House Bill 851, was filed by Representative Rob Long. So another bill that was heard last week and actually passed out of all of its assigned committees is Senate Bill 320 on administrative efficiencies in public schools by Senator Simon. We have been continuing to call this DREG 3.0. It's our third year of seeing some language around deregulation. There have been some modifications from last year. Of course, it didn't move the way the Senate had hoped, but really took out some of the controversial things that were kind of holding things up. But the the committee passed it this week or last week, with the intention of now it is prepared for a vote on the floor.
Which is, really a little bit like Groundhog Day, a little bit, because that's really what happened last year. We knew it was a priority for the Senate. It moved all the way through and moved very quickly. And then, as you noted, it didn't really go anywhere in the House. And so Senator Simon said when he filed the bill this year, well, the vast majority of the components of the bill remain the same. He did remove the provision that would have taken away the requirement to pass the 10th grade ELA and Algebra 1 assessment in order to graduate. Now, students would have still had to take the exam, but it would not have prevented them from graduating if they had not passed it. He took that out because that really seemed to be the poison pill in the House. And he said, while he's still committed to that policy and believes that it was good policy, he didn't want everything in that DREG bill to die just because of that provision. So we're hopeful now that that piece that we know the House objected to is out, that perhaps we can get this bill all the way on both sides this year.
Absolutely. And we're looking forward to that language moving over on the House side, and expecting that to be heard very soon. FASA, of course, has been very supportive of this language from the very beginning, and even offered our support during those committee stops.
That's right.
Another bill that we've seen before and that has also been filed by Senator Simon is the Rural Renaissance Bill. So you kind of mentioned that about being the Senate President's priority. It is this year Senate Bill 250, and it is through its one committee stop. It's ready for the floor. Some of the things that it's hoping to accomplish are certainly helping rural local governments find more state and federal funding resources, working to increase the quality of healthcare in rural areas, and enhancing the safety of rural roads.
Yes. And the bill does also have an education part of it as well. It expands the services that regional consortia can offer and increases per member funding for the regional consortia. It establishes the Rural Incentive for Professional Educators program to provide student loan repayment for up to $15,000 for teachers and administrators who live and work in a public or private school in the rural areas of opportunity. So obviously this is a very large bill. It covers a number of policy issues. It's a very important priority for the Senate President. It, like DREG, was the first bill that they passed last year on the Senate floor, and obviously it didn't make it in the House. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more agreement this year, and we'll see some movement on that on the House side as well.
Right. And even in the Senate President's opening remarks during that session for the Senate, he talked a lot about supporting rural, supporting agriculture, and really kind of moving things forward. So another topic that is going to be a major discussion, of course, is around school choice and vouchers. So Senate Bill 318 was filed by Senator Gates. It has already made its way through its one committee stop. It also is poised for the Senate floor. It does not have a companion yet. We do expect some language coming from the House, especially from potentially the Appropriations Committee, to put out some language, because we know they had 4 meetings all discussing the issues that arise last year through the voucher system. So there is a lot of discussions moving forward on that, and to improve student tracking, ensuring that that funding really does follow the student, consistency across the scholarship programs, and just making sure that we have a great accountability for these systems and where the money is going. But there's also a few amendments filed for when it's heard on the floor too. So maybe some tweaks along the way.
That's right. Exactly. And I think it seems, at least based on the comments that we've heard from House members. Now, of course, we have not seen a bill, as you noted, from the House, but they did have all those committee meetings on it, that the main disagreement, at least right now, seems to be on whether or not we remove the scholarship funding piece from the FEFP and have it be a standalone item on its own. Right now, of course, it does flow through the FEFP. The House seems opposed to that idea. The Senate has proposed it in this bill. And in fact, the governor in his recommended budget also recommended that the funding be removed from the FEFP. So that's an area where we see alignment with the Senate and the governor. So we'll see if the House changes their mind as we move along. Yeah. So some other things that are on our radar, of course, I think the number one topic has to be property taxes. It's not education related exactly, but depending on what they choose to do, it certainly can have an impact. We know the governor wants it. He's been very vocal about it for months. We have the 8 bills in the House that have been filed that tackle it in a myriad of different ways. And we've seen nothing from the Senate.
Right.
And so that is going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. It's hard to imagine that they don't do something just with the political pressure that has kind of grown around this issue. But they were asked about it. Both the speaker and the president, have, the speaker, of course, said we have our bills, everyone's being a little coy on the Senate side as to whether or not what we're going to end up with. But there's just buzz around that, to be sure.
So is there a special session, and do we get the budget done on time? And there's a lot of questions certainly that are going to come into play as it relates to that. And on the House side of those 8 bills, I was really kind of looking back. There's one that's moving forward more than others, but anything can happen until the last day of session. So more to come.
That is right. And our members will recall that it was a sales tax related proposal that came from the House that really kind of derailed session last year. So it could be a tax issue again that holds us up. So we shall see.
Yep.
So as for this week, we did hear a couple of bills in committee. I would say none were life-changing. That's not uncommon in the very beginning of session. Typically, you'll have your major priorities, then you'll have some bills that really don't generate a lot of controversy. So we had Senator Burgess had a bill that was up in committee that would require all classrooms that teach primarily social studies to have a portrait of George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. There was also a bill that expands last couple of years ago. I can't remember if it was last year or not. They are running together at my age. But they allowed students that were in the marching band to use that as a credit for PE.
Right.
And so building on that, Senator Berman has come forth with a bill that would allow students who participate in the Special Olympics, that could count as their PE credit. And then they also in that bill realized, and this happens, of course, from time to time, that when they wrote the language that would exempt the marching band students from PE, they didn't say and, they said or. And so they were thinking that they would have to they couldn't count marching band as an art. And the intent was for them to be able to use that as their art credit for graduation and their PE credit. So they clarified that. So now students who are in the marching band, that can count as your art requirement and your PE requirement. And then if her bill makes it all the way, then you would be able to count participation in the Special Olympics. So those are the types of bills that we're used to hearing in the first week of session, not ones where you get lots of people complaining or having issues with that.
For sure. And I think just things too there's no legislation filed, but topics that we're heavily focused on, right? Schools of Hope is a huge one. And how do we ensure that our districts, our schools, our students ultimately are best served and managing all of the details that come with such a vague program, so to speak. So we'll be watching more for that. The other thing coming up this week is a state board of education meeting.
Yes.
Is on the 21st of January. There's a few rules on the agenda. You just never know what's going to come from the state board. We did have a couple of new people appointed just last week by the governor. So it'll be interesting to see those leaders kind of step into this new role. And then there was also filed rulemaking authority or rulemaking on the school start time exemptions. So people will remember that we put this law into place and said it was going to have to roll out in the 26th school year. But then last year we somewhat repealed it and said, hey, if you've done feasibility and you can't do it as a school district, you get to send a letter to the department.
Yeah.
Well, the department has put things into rule as to what that will look like.
Yeah.
So they actually have already filed what the draft language looks like in a short, simple form that districts will have to fill out and show that they've done feasibility studies and why this is cumbersome to make these changes for middle school and high school start times.
That's right. And I would encourage our members to look at the FASA bill tracker, the member filing deadline. So it was January 9th. That's the date when they have to have all their bills in that they intend to file for the legislative session. So as you might imagine, during those last couple of days prior to the 9th, we saw just an absolute deluge of bills being filed. So if you haven't looked at it since Christmas break, take a look. We have many more bills.
And they're moving, and what is being amended and all of that is highly important to make sure that we're following that language and getting feedback from all of our members too, as to how this is actually going to impact the work that they're doing in our schools and districts every day.
Yes.
So we are excited about next week, which is also our advocacy conference.
Yes.
And at Advocate 26, we'll have about 200 administrators from across the state here talking with legislators. So definitely stay tuned, watch your FAFSA emails, be engaged, and more updates are to come.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lounge podcast presented by the Florida Association of School Administrators. Today's podcast was hosted by Michelle White and Jessica Janasiewicz. Podcast was produced by Jeff Willoughby. Original musical recordings by David Higgins. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. New episodes are released each Monday. For show topics, suggestions, questions, or comments, please email communications@fasa.net. We hope you enjoyed the show.